So, with Terminator Dark Fate about to be released, I thought it was about time I made a video on something that's been kicking around my head for years. As many of you know, the second you put time travel in a movie, it creates instant plot holes. Someone or something traveling from the future to the past instantly opens up Pandora's box of questions that will never get answered.
A hunter-destroyer machine, programmed to target the Earth Boy in the past, to ensure that he will not be a problem to us in the present.
Wait, if you destroyed Div in the past, then he won't ever be your enemy. Then you won't have to send a robot back to destroy him, and then he will be your enemy, so then you will have to send a robot back!
And the Terminator franchise is no stranger to that. Going back to the very original.
Your son gave me a message to give to you. Made me memorize it. The future is not set. You must be stronger than you imagine you can be. You must survive, or I will never exist.
How did John Connor know to send back Kyle Reese, guaranteeing him to knock up his mum and train him along with herself to fight Skynet 40 or so years from now? Chicken or the egg? Could boil it all down to a destiny, but I hate those more than time travel plot holes. Just having a prophecy explain all the events of the past and future with no questions is too cheap and easy for me. One of the main aspects I love about Terminator 1 and 2 is the message.
The future's not set. There's no fate but what we make for ourselves.
Terminator 1. Skynet attempted to kill Sarah Connor, changing their own fate, preventing their number one enemy, John Connor, from being born. Terminator 2. Sarah Connor attempts to destroy Cyberdyne, changing her own fate, preventing the planet from being destroyed by Skynet. Both movies end on the note of the future is not set, until Terminator 3 ruined it.
But we stopped Judgment Day.
You only postponed it. Judgment Day is inevitable.
Maybe the future has been written. I don't know.
Humans inevitably die.
Oh. Well, that sucks.
But back to the 1984 original, the big issue of John Connor and Kyle Reese. A son born in 1985 and a father born in 2003. A loop that has made many scratch their heads for years. Well, in this video I'll be sharing my theory on how we got to this loop. Just want to state that this isn't like a mind-blowing theory that makes you see the franchise in a different light. Just something that removes the confusing element of Kyle Reese and John Connor, adding to the perfection of the original classic. Also, if this is already a theory floating around the internet, then I haven't seen it anywhere. So therefore I decided to make this video. So let's get into it. And my theory is that there are 3 timelines going on with Terminator 1984, and the timeline that you see in the movie is actually the 3rd timeline.
You're talking about things that I haven't done yet in the past tense. It's driving me crazy.
The first timeline I'm going to refer to as the John Connor timeline. This timeline sets up all of our main players, building the foundation of importance for the future. In this timeline, there is no time travel. Sarah Connor lived a normal life from birth up until the events of the first movie. Works at the diner, is on the dating scene, getting stood up by chumps.
So what if he has a Porsche? He can't treat you like this. It's Friday night, for Christ's sake.
This Sarah Connor is never in danger pretty much until the events of Judgment Day. However, at some point in her life, she becomes pregnant, not to Kyle Reese, just a random guy she met at some point in her life. A lot of things just boil down to coincidence in this timeline, one of which being she will decide to call her son John. Other factors could lead to John's involvement in the future resistance. Either whoever the father is in this timeline could be ex-military, or John could just end up having unrelated interests in joining the military. It could lead to him watching the development of artificial intelligence becoming more important and seeing the potential danger.
But the dark future, which never came, still exists for me. And it always will. John fights the war differently than it was foretold. Here, on the battlefield of the Senate, his weapons are common sense and hope.
Also, while we're in the John Connor timeline, the original date for Judgment Day would most likely not be 1997, because the original date of 1997 being so early was due to the Terminator technology being found in the first movie and studied by Miles Dyson, speeding up the development of the Terminators much quicker. But the Terminator isn't sent back in this timeline, so we can assume that the development of artificial intelligence would be more around this time in 2019 or even later. So for the sake of this timeline theory, John could be in the military well into his 30s and 40s before this Judgment Day, using that acquired knowledge against Skynet and forming the resistance. Someone he meets along the way is a young whippersnapper called Kyle Reese, and then Reese ends up being his right-hand man. By this point, Sarah Connor would have no impact on the events of the future, and maybe even the original father of John doesn't play an important role either. And in this timeline, there is no reason for John to make Reese fall in love with his mother. Now, this is the way the timeline ends. They have been fighting the rise of infiltration units known as Terminators. Just as the resistance is on the brink of destroying Skynet, Time Machine is built. John Connor and his unit stumble upon the time machine, see that the time coordinates are set for 1984, and the target is his mother before he was born. Thinking on his feet, John would either know going back himself to save his mother could mean different types of problems, like she would never believe him, or he would tell her too much about her own life, or maybe he wanted to stay in his own time and finish defeating Skynet for good. So what does he do? Sends his first in command to protect his mother. Kyle Reese accepts the order and goes back in time to fight the Terminator and protect John Connor's mother. This is the end of the John Connor timeline. So that was a timeline without a destiny or predetermined fate, probably the least to resemble the 1984 movie, and if it was a movie, it would be the most un-Terminator movie ever made. But now, onto the second timeline. This is what I call the Kyle Reese timeline. This is where Kyle becomes one of the most important characters in the story. The beginning of this timeline will pretty much be how the movie begins. The T-800 arrives, followed by Kyle Reese. The target for both is Sarah Connor. Now what makes this timeline different is that Kyle Reese hasn't entered 1984, already in love with John's mother. It's purely a protection mission. She isn't a legend to him, for in this timeline she wasn't prepared for war and isn't responsible for John's military training. I would imagine they would both have a much different dynamic in this timeline, and would probably take him longer to convince Sarah that he's actually from the future. Much more of this.
Listen, understand, I am not a military objective, I'm a person and you don't own me.
Let's go.
Fuck you, let me go.
Sarah!
That being said, they would still fall in love. Kyle, being the loveless, war-torn shell of a man he is when dropped into 1984, would still fall in love with the lonely Sarah Connor.
Pugsley still loves me, don't you, baby? God. It's disgusting.
As this timeline continues, he begins unintentionally training Sarah, teaching her the same survival skills John would have taught him. Also very similar to the events of the movie. At some point they fall in love and bang. This is the moment Kyle Reese becomes the most important character for both Sarah and John Connor, ultimately changing Sarah Connor's character from the previous timeline. An average woman who had no interest in weapons, combat training, or preventing a nuclear holocaust. But now, after a timeline where John was the only one with military knowledge, his mother will now have it before him. The events will then conclude the same way the movie goes, as they are constantly on the run from the Terminator. Kyle Reese still dies saving her. Sarah then begins her life preparing for the grim future of Skynet and Cyberdyne, but now has to guarantee that when her son grows up and meets Kyle Reese, that he is John's father and must be sent back to protect her.
Should I tell you about your father? Will it affect your decision to send him here, knowing that he is your father? If you don't send Kyle, you can never be.
As time goes on, John meets Kyle Reese, gives him a photo of his mother. The day comes again when they find the time machine, and now grown-up John Connor selects Kyle specifically to go back in time to protect his mother. Cut to the third timeline, which is the 1984 movie. This is what I'll call the Sarah Connor timeline. And now everyone knows how the events of the movie play out. The Sarah Connor timeline now puts all the weight of the world on her shoulders. Essentially, the second timeline answers all of the plot holes in the first movie. Once I realized that there could be multiple timelines before the first movie, it all sort of made sense to me. It all starts off with a timeline that doesn't resemble the events of the first movie at all. But every time someone goes back to protect Sarah Connor, there are different outcomes. It all goes back to the phrase,
"The future's not set. There's no fate but what we make for ourselves."
Then a fourth timeline could be too much preparation. Then that would most likely be the Terminator timeline. And the Terminator would end up killing Sarah and Kyle because there was too many beats that they had to hit to guarantee the fourth timeline be identical to the third. But the main reason why the movie is the third timeline is because of out of all the fates and journeys and destinies, that one was the most compelling. Not just a solid action flick, but the love story is one of the strongest aspects of that movie.
I came across time for you, Sarah. I love you. I always have.
So that's my theory on the Destiny plot hole from 1984's The Terminator. Wasn't that complicated if you accept different timelines that end up overlapping? But out of such a complicated and debated issue, the simplest answer is usually the most obvious one. History keeps being rewritten.
You can't understand. It's gone. All gone. All of it. It's gone.
Well, we can change it, Kyle. We have to at least try. There's no fate but what we make for ourselves, right? Come on, kiddo. What do you say?
Okay.
And if you like this theory video and want to see more, then drop a like and a comment letting us know your thoughts, or even if you have theories of your own. Keen to hear them. However, I don't care about theories for Terminator 3 and Genesis, as they don't count as movies. Terminator Salvation is the only sequel outside of the James Cameron movie that I actually respect the originality of it. Always wanted to see the John Connor adventures in the future, and I think it did a good job of it. Not perfect, but not a beat-for-beat rehash of what worked before it. Now, to see if Terminator Dark Fate can live up to the first two, but already, Dark Fate implies that there's a fate. If you like this video and want to support more content, then head over to the CorderyFX Patreon. Thanks for watching.